And it means so much to the family to look around and to see this place filled with people who loved David, who were touched by David. And the family has asked that we make a lot of the rituals clear so people understand what's happening in each of the moments. And so, in honoring David Schreiber's life and also in honoring Jewish tradition, we're going to do now what is called a kriya, which is the symbolic tearing of a ribbon. Traditionally, clothes are torn to symbolize our grief, especially the closest family members. And today, in a more modern setting, we use a black ribbon. So I'm going to facilitate that at this moment, and then we will begin our service.
No, I see that. Over here.
In speaking with David's two sons, we had talked about what would be an appropriate way to begin our service, and Ecclesiastes came up that there is a time for everything, a time to grieve, which is now, and also a time to celebrate. And so, from Ecclesiastes, a season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for being born and a time for dying, a time for weeping and a time for laughing, a time for wailing, a time for dancing, a time for throwing stones, a time for gathering stones, a time for ripping, a time for sowing, a time for silence and a time for speaking, a time for loving, a time for hating, a time for war, and a time for peace. David was very good at planning how he wanted us to celebrate his life in this moment. And I've only known David, I had only known him since 2020. But he mentioned his funeral a few times. And I think he enjoyed speaking about it because he enjoyed making sure that the plans were made and everything was set, of course. And it's a great gift that he did this, that he planned these things ahead of time so that you would know in this moment how to honor his life in a way that he would have wanted, which is this right now, what we're doing. And I think also that he enjoyed to think about how that would go. So one of the poems that he had in, I guess it was a file on the computer, was When Great Trees Fall. Now, anyone who knows David or who knows also me knows that I will read any poem at any time. And so we are going to read this poem in his honor, the one that he chose himself. When great trees fall. When great trees fall, rocks on distant hills shudder. Lions hunker down in tall grasses, and even elephants lumber after safety. When great trees fall in forests, small things recoil into silence, their senses eroded beyond fear. When great souls die, the air around us becomes light, rare, sterile. We breathe briefly, our eyes briefly see with a hurtful clarity. Our memory suddenly sharpened examines, gnaws on kind words unsaid, promised walks never taken. Great souls die, and our reality bound to them takes leave of us. Our souls dependent upon their nurture, now shrink, wizened. Our minds, formed and informed by their radiance, fall away. We are not so much maddened as reduced to the unutterable ignorance of dark, cold caves. And when great souls die after a period, peace blooms, slowly and always, irregularly. Spaces fill with a kind of soothing electric vibration, our senses restored never to be the same, whispered to us, they existed, they existed. We can be and be better, for they existed. It's an honor to welcome up David's grandchildren, Abby, Zev, Adi, and Brad.
There are a lot of faces here, a lot that I recognize and some that I don't. It's very nice to see you all. Hi. Hi. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Abby and I'm David's firstborn grandchild. I really hate the reason that I'm speaking today, but I really love the person that I'm speaking for. So I'm going to try to honor him the best I can. I would promise to keep it short, but for those of you who knew my papa, concise conversation was not his specialty. The man loved talking more than almost anyone that I know. It skipped a generation and landed squarely on my shoulders, but truthfully, I never minded his stories, no matter how excessive the length, because he was a really excellent storyteller. That's so much of why I think he was ready to go in the end. The second that he felt that slipping away, he was ready. He was never willing to lose his intellect. My papa was incredibly smart. His vocabulary was unmatched, and the limit for what he could turn into a pun or slant rhyme seemed somewhat infinite. If you've ever been on the receiving end of one of his homemade birthday or anniversary cards, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I grew up knowing that he was a therapist, and that was as far as the fact extended in my brain. It really wasn't until I decided to major in English and then journalism, respectively, that I realized my papa had done the exact same thing. I'm not sure how much nature versus nurture was at play there. I just know that I'd never realized quite how similar we were until that moment. After working for the Newark Evening News for several years, he moved into investor relations, much like I moved into the tech field myself. It never occurred to me how much later in life he became a therapist until I mentioned to him that I was worried that I'd missed my own calling. Maybe therapy or psychology of some kind was what I was meant to do. I'm so sorry, I'll slow down. It's strange the things that we don't ask the people that we love. Here he was for all of these years, this steadfast compass in my life, and it took me so long to start asking him questions. But I guess that's the purpose of that compasses serve. They guide you by design. I think we both felt the pull to English, journalism, and therapy for the same reasons. We want to understand people. He was always the kind of man to ask why. He was no stranger to complicated relationships, as his childhood would indicate. But he always wanted to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. Things were never purely good or bad. They could always be explained. Whether it was getting to the root of an article or easing his patient's burdens, reason and truth would always win out. Do you understand what a gift that is, to have had someone like that as a patriarch? He saw everyone as a whole person, even if you only introduced him to a part. He loved my grandma beyond measure, and he raised the most wonderful men who went on to be similar husbands and fathers. To grow up with such strong yet soft male role models is a gift that so many people don't get. He was a fierce believer in equity and equality. Long before I could truly understand it, the prevalence of racism, sexism, and homophobia in this country were relayed to me in child-friendly doses, and the message was clear. Be kind, listen, always learn. Papa Dave was truly ahead of his time. So, for a man who was always one step ahead, it makes sense that he was ready to let go of all of this before any of us were ready to let go of him. He did everything in his power to make it to my wedding, which was November 2nd of this year, just 32 days before he died. Apparently, that was his last good day. I don't think it's luck that got him there. I think it's just love. I'm sure that everyone in this room knows his kids and grandkids were his pride and joy. In fact, I'm sure that several of you know some pretty mundane details about all of our lives, as he was always one to wax poetic about the people he loved. If you've ever tagged me in a Facebook post, I'm quite certain he's commented on it. I had the privilege of being his first grandchild, and proximity-wise, I was the closest. Every single Thursday night till I was about 6, I would spend the night with my grandparents at their house in Media. Then on Fridays, we'd go on an adventure. Sometimes we'd go into Old City and visit a museum. Other times, we'd visit my grandma Mimi in Atlantic City, where they'd let me run loose in the Taj Mahal casino. Kind of kidding. I was only semi-loose. They had their eyes on me. But what I remember the most are the drives back home, where Papa would tell me stories. Sometimes they were real, like how he crawled out onto the roof as a child, and the only thing that could lure him back was Mimi dangling his dad's pocket watch at him. But mostly they were made up, like the tales of Diaper Sore, a baby dinosaur who got into various mishaps. He never got sick of talking to me. And on those Thursday nights before our adventures, we'd watch movies and musicals, mostly Sondheim. Papa would play the piano, and I'd sit on the bench next to him and sing. Just two hyperactive Schreibers along for the ride. It's easy to forget in all of that talking that he was an amazing listener, too. He wanted to hear all of my thoughts and stories. Every time I saw a new show, heard a new album, watched a new movie, he was one of the first people I would share it with. I think that most people wind up being closer to their grandmas, especially for people in my age bracket. And believe me, I am incredibly close to my grandma, who I love more than most things in this world. But from the moment that I was born, I was a Papa's girl. And what a gift that has been. It's the best gift of my life. And I'll miss you forever.
The poet Daphne Rose Kingham wrote that it is love that fashions us, love that fashions us into the fullness of our being, not our work, not our wants, not our achievements. It is love, who we love, how we love, why we love, and that we love, which ultimately shapes us. It is love before all and after all, in the beginning and in the end, that creates us. And it was love that fashioned David Schreiber into the man that we honor and celebrate today. A native of Newark, New Jersey, David was a very proud graduate of Rutgers University, where he majored in English and minored in psychology. Something I didn't know until speaking with the family, that David also played basketball for Rutgers, and his love of Rutgers, especially Rutgers football games, was something that he handed down to his sons, bringing the boys to football games while Laura worked on Saturdays as an ICU nurse. After graduating, David worked as a reporter for the Newark Evening News, which at the time was New Jersey's largest daily newspaper. He would cover Rutgers and Princeton universities, among other assignments. And David then also served in various public and investor relation capacities before he formed his own financial services company. But in 1992, David decided to pursue a new career as a mental health therapist, and he obtained a master's degree from Temple University. And as a licensed clinical social worker, David was employed by Delaware County Professional Services and Family and Community Services of Delaware County before he again established a private practice, and he retired in 2013. As we know about David, he strongly believed in public and community service. While in college, David served in the New Jersey Air National Guard and was deployed and stationed in France. And throughout his life, David served different nonprofits and community organizations. And here is a shortened list of all the organizations he has been a part of. I shortened it for time. President of the Human Rights Council of Scotch Plains, Fanwood, New Jersey. Director of Delaware County Family and Community Services. Treasurer of National Investor Relations Institute of Philadelphia. Volunteer with Heartland Hospice. And a member of the Board of Trustees of the Upper Chichester Library, where he was involved in library activities and supported other fundraising activities. Famously, David announced that he fell in love with Laura on their first date. I'm told that he proposed 6 months later. David was 23 when he married Laura at 21 and was then deployed through the National Guard to France during the Berlin Wall crisis. Laura went with them for those early happy years of marriage. And Laura, as we all know, continued to be the love of David's life. He was always supporting her, always speaking warmly and lovingly of her, and always fiercely protective. Laura says that David was the one who kept their life interesting, kept her life interesting with all of the things that he was interested in, all of the shows and books and things that he filled his life with. This culture and this excitement about learning kept her life interesting as well. David's ability to love and to be loved by others around him was remarkable, especially given the circumstances of his own childhood. He had a loving relationship with his father, whom he lost when he was 37, but his relationship with his mother was complicated. David's paternal grandparents, whom he lived with at one point, were the most stable force in his young life. And David often credited, when speaking with me, David often credited his grandmother with raising him. his Catholic grandmother. And he was always very proud to say, I am a Jewish boy. I was raised by a my Catholic grandmother. Catholic Irish, that's right. That's right. David was the first to tell you that he was not a religious person. He was a very proud cultural Jew, right? He loved Jewish food and he loved that he was Jewish, but he was not a religious person. So it was a great shock to the family when they started to hear about David's budding and growing relationship with the new rabbi. And as his sons Mark and Brian explained, David always dropped anything he was doing when they would call. But in the last 4 years, they couldn't believe that they would call their dad. He would pick up the phone and he would say, I can't talk right now. I'm studying with the rabbi. I don't know if David ever knew or realized this, but I felt the same way. I felt the same way about him. David was more than a congregant of mine. He was, as I like to call him, my buddy. One time he came on to Zoom and he signed on, and I called out, "There's my buddy Dave." And he liked that enough that when he would email me from that point on, he would sign off, "Your buddy Dave." So Dave and I first bonded when during the early days of the pandemic, he had suggested in a totally David Schreiber way that we have a congregational check-in one night a week. A meeting on Zoom where people could log in and connect and share anything that was troubling them, right? This was the early days in the pandemic. We weren't seeing each other in person. He wanted to make sure that nobody fell through the cracks. And I thought this was a great idea, and I agreed to co-lead it with him. And it was over those weekly chats that I started to learn who Dave was, his love of Laura and his family, his unease with Judaism as a religion, his willingness to learn, and his openness and genuine concern for the people around him. And after this time, Dave started to come to more and more programs, and he became a regular at our weekly Torah study, which I was told by everyone who knew him that this was a complete miracle. He began to attend our monthly Shabbat for the Soul programs on Saturday morning. And he would thank me often for, as he would say, opening up this part of himself that he didn't know was there, an opening to Judaism and spirituality, and ultimately, I'm told, towards the end of his life, a relationship with God. I don't think I deserve that credit. It was Dave who did the work. It was Dave who remained open to me as his rabbi, and it was Dave who yearned to learn more. It was his willingness to continue to grow and change, even in his early 80s, right? What a blessing that is. That was his strength. That's what he left us. That legacy, the willingness to learn, to change, to be open to people he doesn't know. If you knew Dave, you may have also been lucky enough to have received from him one of his famous handmade birthday cards. Raise your hand if you've received one of his handmade birthday cards. We are in a special club together. I don't know if you know how remarkable it is that I found this, because I still am not totally unpacked from my move, but I found the card that Dave made me. So I am proud to say that I have also received a handmade loving card from Dave Schreiber, and it is titled "Great Things Happened on November 4." Followed by indeed great events that took place on, I'm trusting him, November 4, which included the day that he has here a picture of the Obamas. President Obama was elected president. King Tut's tomb was also found. There was a chimp that was reported to have been seen using tools. And then on the inside, it says, best of all, great people were born. And then it's a picture of me and my daughter and my husband. We were not all born on the same day, but it's a picture he found of us. And it says, esteemed Rabbi Janine with family. He's the only one who calls me esteemed rabbi. And our beloved grandchild, Adi, who was also born on November 4th. And it says Mazel Tov, and it's signed Laura and David. So I was really grateful to receive this card. And I learned a lot of details about November 4th. I also didn't have the heart to tell David that I was born on November 1st. But it's okay. It's okay. I learned so much, so much. I so greatly admired Dave. Even though I was almost 50 years younger than him, even though I was the new female rabbi, Dave he always treated me with respect. He always referred to me as rabbi, and I eventually earned the title my rabbi as we got to know each other more and more. And to be David Schreiber's rabbi was for me one of the greatest honors of my lifetime. And I will miss my buddy, Dave, tremendously. It is love that fashions us. It is love before all and after all, in the beginning and in the end, that creates us. David led a life filled with love. He will be missed by all of us. He will be missed by his wife, Laura, of 63 years, his two sons, Brian and Mark, his daughter-in-laws, Sydney and Suzanne, his grandchildren, Abigail, Brad, Adi, and Zev. His life was filled with love, and he knew how to love, and he knew how to give love and be loved. He will be greatly missed by all of us who knew him and loved him. I'm going to invite up Adi to read another poem. This one, Yesh Kochavim, There Are Stars by Hannah Senish.
There are stars up above, so far away, we only see their light. Long, long after a star itself is gone, and so it is with people that we loved. Their memories keep shining ever brightly through their time with us is done. But the star that lights up the darkest night, they are the lights that guide us. As we live our days, these are the ways we remember. As we live our days, these are the ways we remember.
Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. The Lord makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. God restores my soul. God leads me in the paths of righteousness for God's name's sake. And yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I invite you and everyone who's able to please rise for El Malei Rachamim.
Chamim shochen bamraim hamitzem nechanechana tachat kanfei hashchina b'ma'alot kedoshim u'tahorim k'zohar harakia mazhi et nishma David ben Gershon shehala le'olamo began Eden Leolamim Otzeror vitzror hachaim et nishmato Adonai nachalato v'yanuach b'shalom amishkavo v'noma O God, exalted and full of compassion, grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of David Schreiber, who is gone to his eternal home. Master of mercy, we beseech you, remember all the worthy and righteous deeds that David performed in the land of the living. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. The Lord is his portion. May he rest in peace. And let us all say,
Amen.
Amen.
You may be seated. Everyone is welcome and invited to a luncheon afterwards, following this service in just a few moments. As Brian said, Dave loved a good spread. And so honor his memory and his life by enjoying it as well. So we are in a moment going to recite Mourner's Kaddish, the traditional prayer that is said at different points during a service, but is known as, for many, Kaddish Yatom, the Kaddish, the Mourner's Kaddish for those who are orphaned, and is synonymous for many people as the prayer that we say when we are in mourning. After Mourner's Kaddish, I'm going to ask everyone to allow the family to exit out of the back, and then we'll slowly join them as well. So at this time, I'm going to invite the family to please rise for Mourner's Kaddish. And then for anyone else who is also saying Kaddish, who might be in mourning at this moment, or for whom your custom is to rise as well. Please feel free to rise. Yitgadal v'yitgadash Shmei Rabba Be'alma divra chirute v'yamlich machute v'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chaye dekol Beit Yisrael ba'agala uv'izman kari v'imru. Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabba mevarach leolam umei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemed kudisha b'rechu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran be'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom bin Ramav. Hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Invite the family too. Thank you, everyone, for being here to celebrate an exceptional person. And we will continue to celebrate his life. Please join us for the luncheon. Please join us for Shiva at the Schreiber's home. And I believe there were pamphlets that were handed out or some information about what times they're welcoming people for Shiva as well. Thank you.